In this video, I'm going to show you the functionalities you can use in Napari for visualization. So here I have the image I opened before I converted into ZAR. And you have several sections. So the one at the bottom left part of Napari here, so you can actually change these things. You can, for example, put it here or put it same place, and then you can change between layer controls and layer list. I'm going to try to put it back here. This is the layer control, it's for layers. So here it's in some way a bit similar to what you can find in Photoshop. You're going to have layers. So each image is a layer. Generally, when you have different channels, you're going to have one layer per channel. So here I only have one channel. It's there. I can change the name if I double left click. I can change the name to image, for example. Obviously, it can be more explicit. And then you have several comments you can use here, and you have your image in there. And here, as it's a 3D image, I have a slider below the image. And so I can move from one plane to another by sliding it. Okay? So for visualization, so there's an opacity thing, which is not useful here. We only have one layer. And most of the time, you're going to change the blending. So here we only have one layer, for example. But if you put it to translucent, then you can have different layers and you can visualize them all together. Okay? And then you can change the contrast. So you can change the lower contrast and the higher contrast. How does that work? It's going to be easier to explain when we have the whole slide. So if you do a right click on one or the other, then you have the whole slide. What does it tell you? It tells you that here the lowest intensity is for this volume, probably. I think it's in the volume. I don't think it's depending on the image here. So the lowest intensity is 102. The highest intensity is 1205. Okay, so if I choose, so here it tells me as it's put just between the lowest and the highest, the pixels that have an intensity of 102 are black, the pixels that have an intensity of 1205 are white. Everything in between is going to be in gray levels. If I change this here, if I increase the lower bound, now, for example, all the pixels that have an intensity inferior or equal to 246 are black. And if I do the same here, now all the pixels that have an intensity superior or equal to 1052 are white. If I decrease it, I'm going to have more and more white pixels, and it's going to look like it's saturating at one point. It's just visualization, very important. Okay, you can also play with the gamma, but I would really recommend not to use that because it's much harder to interpret what you do, to really understand what you're doing. You can change the color maps, which is, like LUT in Fiji. So for example, I can move to blue, Bob blue, cyan. You also have color maps that are useful when you do heat maps, for example. I'm going to go back to gray. And then, so this is a 3D volume. So I can do a 3D reconstruction. To do this, I'm going to click on this icon. All right. And here the rendering is a MIP. So most of the time the MIP is going to be a good option. You can play with the other ones, but MIP is really good. So you see when you have a reconstruction, generally, so if I put this to the minimum, you see that it's not very nice. You have, it's pixels with low intensity, but when you render it, it's visually not really appealing. So it's often good to have a low contrast, pretty high. So you have a good contrast between your object and the background, okay? And then you can also do the depiction in plane. So just I didn't explain, so to do that, to rotate, you use the left click. If you use the scrolling, so this works in 2D as well. You're going to zoom in, zoom out, and you can also use the right click to work as well. Now, if you use the shift and left click, you can move with the same view your object. Let me show you. Okay, you can also do a rendering not for the entire volume, but just for smaller planes. So here you can choose the thickness. And what is interesting is that then by using Shift and left click, you can move the plane that is displayed. Let me show you. So it's like, just an orthogonal slice. Sometimes it's called like this. Or here, so you just display a small volume, and you can do it this way also. So that can be nice sometimes, depending what you want to look at. So I'm going to go back to volume here. And so here you can, move around the whole object this way.